Yes.
This is a very technical question,
Yes.
so I hope you'll bear with me, but there seems to be confusion in the gun control, gun rights community around what the definition that you brought forward actually means. And it's particularly around the terminology for design. That it's the guns that would be prohibited would be designed
capacity.
to have a detachable magazine of 5
for which it was
rounds
originally designed.
Can you? But that's exactly it. So the legal definition that you propose does not say originally designed. It says design, and so people think that it would ban virtually all semi-automatic centerfire rifles because all of them have these aftermarket magazines.
Yeah.
Can you please clarify if it's intended to be originally designed, i.e. the original design of that gun, and therefore much more restricted? Can you please clarify that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you are touching on one of the real intricacies around the language which constitutes the evergreen provision, which is designed, the rationale of the evergreen provision is to move forward with a model agnostic approach around creating a zone that is going to capture prohibited assault style rifles. And we think that by having this provision in place, 2 very positive objectives will be reached. The first is that you move away from cherry-picking models, which can be politicized, and obviously, as you heard me say yesterday, we want to take the politics out of this. We want to bring the temperature down and have a responsible, civilized debate, which is based on facts, as opposed to fear or disinformation. And the second thing is that by entrenching this evergreen provision into the law, as opposed to just using an administrative instrument like the order in council, it will have a more enduring and lasting effect, so that future governments who may have a different view.
Can you answer the question on the definition? Are you going to change it to say originally designed?
So I don't want to preempt the work of the committee, okay?
But what is your government's intention? That's the question. Is your government's intention to ban virtually all semi-automatic centerfire rifles, or is it to ban the ones that are more restricted through the additional word of originally designed?
Well, so again, I don't want to preempt the work of the committee. The committee is studying the definition. They're hearing from experts on how we have created those objective criteria. So, for example, muzzle force, the bore diameter, the semi-automatic.
And 22 gauge that I use.
I'm asking if you can clarify the intent.
And we want to be sure that we get the language completely aligned with the intent,
What is the intent?
I'm describing what the criteria are, including the last one around magazine cartridge capacity to be eligible for the receipt by the gun. So that is precisely what we're moving forward with.
But is it originally designed or is it not? What is the intent?
I believe that the intent is originally designed, and making sure that we get clarification about that, but I also don't want to preempt the evidence that will come forward by experts in law enforcement who have looked at these objective criteria to make sure that we get the parameters.
Does the government have any?
I'll come back to you.
Does the government have any concerns about national security?
On the list, you said particularly that you're not cherry picking. That this whole idea of this quote unquote
just to move away from that idea.
To move away from it. Except at the same time, you are taking a list that's in regulations, putting it in legislation, admitting it's done to constrain future parliaments, and you're adding more guns onto it. So you are still cherry picking at the same time that you're saying you're not, and that this definition is supposed to move away from it. Can you explain why?
Okay, so in the first case, there are lists of guns that have been prohibited for years.
Through regulations.
Through regulations, correct. And the idea is to not depart from that standard because and those decisions, because they have been in place in some cases going back to the 1990s and then more recently in 2020. And so to depart from that obviously would create confusion. We don't want to do that. So those lists are there. They will be entrenched in the law, and there will be clarity about that. There won't be any ambiguity about which guns are prohibited under those lists. If I could just be permitted to finish, because I'm trying to be responsive to your question, Marika. The point of the evergreen is to move away from that practice and to alleviate some of the the pressure on officials and experts to revisit this every year or every 2 years, or sometimes arbitrarily even longer than that, and to rather have some more efficiency around how it is that we prohibit guns which are too dangerous to be in our neighborhoods, in our streets. And that is the point around creating those criteria.
I understand that, but my question was, why are you at the same time adding new guns that don't even fall under this definition that you've created? That's supposed to be the clear legal delineation between what is allowed and what is not. You are putting the listed ones that have been previously listed into law, but you are also adding new ones to that list. I don't understand why that was done if the whole point of the definition is to get away from the cherry picking that you just identified.
Yeah, no, look, it's a fair point.
But why then? Explain.
I'm going to explain. We are taking some transitional steps by also having a list, but to move away, not overnight, not all in one fell swoop,
but why would a transitional step become law? If it's a transitional step, you wouldn't put it in legislation.
To have clarity around those additional models, which may, in our judgment,
and 22 gauge that I use
to be left in the community. That's why.
But they don't meet the definition that you've created.
Well, I've given you an answer. My point is that it is not a binary system, right? We want to create the transition, and by having a list which is very clear and transparent, and by also moving towards an evergreen definition, we are making the transition over time to alleviate the pressure on officials to consistently and constantly have to revisit it. Did you want to ask anything, or are you just here to watch? Okay, thanks, Marika.
And 22 gauge that I use